7 years into my relationship with Sean, he met his fated omega. Everyone said I was the lucky one, the beta he loved in defiance of his own instincts. He thought so too, saying proudly, "So what if Lucas is a beta? He's the only one I love." But there are always exceptions. And then there's fate. But at the end of the day, I still need a child. He pulled the handsome young omega to his side and teased him. "You're young and fertile. I guess I can live with that." It took me 7 days to untangle myself from our 7-year marriage. The day I left, the weather was beautiful and so was my mood. I tied Sean's tie just like I always did. I smiled and saw him off at the door. Only this time I didn't say, "I'll be waiting for you." The day before Sean's rut was supposed to end, I didn't wait patiently at home. I snuck over to his private club. Sean was a top-tier alpha, and he always rode out his ruts here, toughing it out alone. He was worried he'd hurt me. I was happy he was so considerate, but I also worried about his health. I'd made a lot of effort trying to accept every part of him. This time, I went a day early because I had some good news to share. The suite was empty, the bed a total mess. The soft, smooth sheets and comforter were sticky. But I wasn't surprised. Alphas in their rut have an insane amount of energy that has to go somewhere. The woman cleaning the room was new. She pointed me in the right direction. "Are you a friend of the owner, too? They're having a party on the top floor." The club's top floor was a swirl of clinking glasses and dim, suggestive lighting. I stood in the shadows by the entrance, feeling a little lost. I recognized most of the people. They were Sean's friends, but there were a few I didn't know, like the delicate, well-behaved boy who never left Sean's side. He looked so young, probably still in college. Suddenly, I was hit by a wave of different scents. Not smoke or cologne. It was the smell of pheromones, something I'd never experienced before. Some sickly sweet, others aggressive, fading in and out near and far. I couldn't pick out which one belonged to Sean. It was too chaotic and I wasn't used to it. I lifted a hand to cover my nose and mouth. Someone was teasing Sean. "Dude, you're 30. What's it feel like to finally meet your fated omega, who's barely 20? Someone else chimed in, "You used to have to suffer through your ruts for 3 days straight. This time you got a full day and night of bliss. You're gonna get hooked on omegas, man." Another friend disagreed. "Nah, Sean's a romantic. He only has eyes for that average beta at home." His tone, his expression, it was all a joke. Sean raised an eyebrow, swirled the red wine in his glass, and downed it in one go. He tossed the empty glass at the guy who'd spoken. "Don't talk shit," he said, his voice casual but firm. I stepped back, leaning my body against the wall. I stared at the scattered, hazy light spilling from the doorway, unwilling to look at his face. Sean was in a great mood, much more talkative than usual. "So what if Lucas is a beta? He's the only one I love." The words burrowed into my ear, making it itch, like ants crawling over my skin. Sean continued, "Sure, an omega is a quick and easy way to get through a rut. But that's all it is. Faded this, faded that, it doesn't matter. The only reason I'm keeping him around is because I'm 30. It's time I had a kid. It's just that my baby can't give me one." Hiding in the dim light, I slowly turned my head, stealing a glance at the man I loved. He pulled the innocent omega with the round cheeks and almond eyes into his arms. He patted his face. "Good thing you're young and fertile. I guess I can live with that. And if I accidentally mark you, it's not a big deal. This way, I won't be so on edge all the time, making Lucas's body ache because he can't handle it." The omega nestled obediently in his arms and nodded softly. His eyes were full of adoration as he deeply inhaled Sean's scent. "Whatever you say, big brother." His friends all laughed and teased him. "So obedient? You're his fated mate. Once he gets a taste, he'll be hooked. A beta can't compare. You could afford to be a little more demanding." Good thing his wife is a beta. Even if Sean really did mark Ethan, he'd never know. Besides, after the marking, only his omega will be able to smell Sean's pheromones. What if he finds out? Someone asked. Sean picked up another wine glass, swirling it slowly. A cruel smile touched his lips. "Then I'll hold every single one of you responsible." The chatter died instantly. The air grew thick with an unspoken pressure. Soft, instrumental music drifted through the room. The Omega carefully pinched Sean's fingertips. "I'm a little scared, big brother," he said innocently. Sean chuckled and tapped his nose. He took a sip of wine, then lowered his head and passed it into the Omega's mouth. "Such a scaredy cat. How are you ever going to keep up with me?" The party roared back to life. The alpha who always told me I was the only one for him was sharing a wine-flavored kiss with an Omega 10 years his junior. I was just a beta. I didn't understand fated mates, and I had no interest in a confrontation. My fingers trembled as I pulled a blister pack of pills from my pocket. The words "not for resale" were printed on it. I squeezed it tighter and tighter. The sharp edges dug into my palm. But I couldn't feel the pain. Just as I had arrived quietly, I turned and left quietly. As I passed a trash can, I tossed the pills inside. Sean stayed out for the full 3 days. But he didn't forget to contact me. He called me. Even through the phone, his breathing was ragged and heavy, just like it always was when he was enduring a rut. No matter how bad he felt, he would always video call me when he was lucid. He'd ask what I did all day, what I ate, how I was feeling, and if I missed him. This time, he didn't video call. He used voice chat instead. I tapped the screen, requesting to switch to video. After a long wait, Sean answered. He was in bed, propped up against a pile of pillows. He was wearing a bathrobe drenched in sweat. Veins pulsed on his forehead, and his eyes were bloodshot. He was clearly in agony, but he looked right at me with a calm expression. "Baby, you miss me? I miss you too. Just a little longer. I'll be home tonight." My eyes scanned the small screen, from his face to every corner of the camera's view. Sean hadn't moved an inch, but in the bottom left corner, the edge of the blanket twitched faintly. The movement was small, but the frequency was fast. I closed my eyes, burying all my emotions. I forced a smile. "You don't look as rough as usual." I was giving myself a chance and giving Sean a chance. Tell the truth so we can do this with some dignity. Clean break. Is this rut milder than usual? Sean only hesitated for a second before coming up with an excuse. I switched to a stronger suppressant. It's a bit better. I wasn't disappointed, just cold. Still, I asked him, "Then why not come home? I can help you." I had said this countless times. But Sean always told me I didn't understand how terrifying an alpha's rut was. He didn't want to hurt me. He never let me near him when he was in a rut. He used to say, "It's fine over video, but if you were right here in front of me, I'm afraid I'd eat you alive." He was clearly fine now, yet he was still lingering there. "Baby, I'm not fully recovered yet. The smell of you would drive me crazy. I'm a beta. I don't have pheromones," I said flatly, "but I just think you smell amazing. So intoxicating it could steal a man's soul." He smiled at me, trying to soothe me. "Be good. I'll be back tonight. I'll bring you a gift to make it up to you. It's my fault for leaving my dear baby all alone." I was, in fact, not happy, so I let him believe his own story. I ended the video call. I looked out the floor-to-ceiling window at the backyard garden. It was filled with red and blue forget-me-nots. They were the same type of flower. Some of the red blossoms just hadn't had time to turn blue yet. Sean and I planted these together when we got married. We both loved what the forget-me-not stood for, eternal love. Looking at them now,
no flower blooms forever.
And there's no such thing as eternal love. It was time for me to leave and make room for someone else. The center sent me a text. It was a reminder to schedule my next checkup and clinical trial appointment. The date was the day after tomorrow. I thought about it and agreed. I wasn't taking the pills anymore, but I still needed the checkup. Sean was a top-tier alpha who had stuck with a beta for 10 years. His massive family fortune had no heir. I felt guilty, but I didn't want Sean to have a child with someone else. So, starting at the end of last year, I began trying everything. I have an alpha friend who works at the Differentiation Research Center. I asked her a ton of questions like, is it really impossible for a beta to get pregnant? What would it take? She said the center was developing a conversion drug that was in the clinical trial phase. It would probably be a few years before it hit the market. The treatment cycle itself would take a year or two. She asked if I could wait. Couldn't. I was desperate to have a child with Sean. I offered to be part of the trial. It's been 6 months. Lately, I'd occasionally been able to smell things, and the back of my neck would sometimes get hot and itchy. Even internally, it felt like things were slowly changing. Like my dormant glands and atrophied womb were budding again, waiting to blossom. Before I found out Sean was cheating, I was thrilled by every small change. But that was all over now. He didn't have to struggle to control himself anymore. And I didn't have to struggle to convert anymore. We would both go back to our original paths. He could be the man at the top of the world. And I could go back to my ordinary life. Sean was back before 6. He was holding a beautifully wrapped bouquet of forget-me-nots. He also brought back a set of blue and white porcelain teaware. I recognized it as an ancient set that had recently been excavated. When I saw the news report, the tea set was covered in dirt, caked with the traces of time. I love porcelain, and I'd mentioned it to Sean offhandedly. That tea set is beautiful, even covered in dust. Sean had just smiled without saying anything, and today he presented it to me. He looked quite proud of himself. Your husband is pretty amazing. Huh? He reached out and tapped his own lips. Come on, baby. Aren't you going to give me my reward? I looked at his crimson lips, but all I could see was the image from the other night of those same lips stained with red wine. I felt sick. I turned away abruptly and placed the tea set on the coffee table. We've been married forever. Let's not do all this stuff. It's time for dinner. Probably because he was already satisfied, Sean didn't insist. He arranged the forget-me-nots in the most prominent spot, then came over and wrapped his arms around my waist. How did you know I haven't eaten? He leaned down and kissed the back of my neck, light as a feather. Baby, I skipped going to the office just to rush back and have dinner with you. He acted like he'd made a huge sacrifice, but I couldn't feel moved anymore. I lowered my head and gave a bitter smile. Really? That must have been so hard for you. The table was laden with delicacies, but I couldn't taste a thing. In the days following his rut, Sean was always busy. A mountain of work would be piled up at the office, waiting for him. He woke up early, and I had to get up with him. It was our routine. I'd help him with his tie and see him out the door. I didn't have a job. Ever since Sean took control of his family's company, he wouldn't let me work. I used to be a potter. I grew up poor and only finished high school. I learned my craft from an old master in a deep alley. The day I carried my very first pot home, a battered-looking Sean crashed into me and shattered it. Before I could even get angry, he collapsed on top of me. He looked like he was trying to pull an insurance scam. My pot was broken and I'd picked up a huge problem. He was the illegitimate son, caught in a bitter power struggle. He was fierce and vicious. He hid out in my tiny rented room for 3 years. He ate my food, lived in my space, and was always hitting on me. He said since he couldn't pay me back with money for helping him, he'd pay me back with his body. I didn't believe him, but I didn't say no. He was too handsome, and his muscles were great to touch. His body completely mesmerized me. And seriously, how many betas get to sleep with an alpha that hot? I could brag about it for the rest of my life. Then one time, his rivals found him. I took a bullet for him and it damaged my right hand. After that, whenever I worked the potter's wheel, my hand would tremble uncontrollably. The pieces I made were always flawed. Sean would watch me and then he'd just hold me and cry. He'd say he was sorry, that he'd destroyed my dream. Later, after he'd won his battle, he came to me with a bouquet of forget-me-nots and proposed. He said he was giving himself to me as compensation. I felt like I'd won the lottery and was about to get crushed by the prize. I dazedly got married. I dazedly moved into a mansion. I didn't have to do anything, and I felt like my life was complete. I lived like that with Sean for 7 years. But then I suddenly realized that human desire is endless. I had love and marriage, money and leisure, but I still craved a heart that would never change. I was too greedy. I shouldn't have forgotten that my name, Yong, means common. I woke up from my beautiful dream and sleepily picked out a tie for Sean. I carefully tied it for him just like always. The color didn't quite match his suit today, but he didn't notice. He bent down to hug me. I'm off to work. Wait for me to come home. I gently pushed him away. Have a safe trip. I didn't say I'll be waiting for you. I wasn't going to wait for him anymore. The next day, I went to the differentiation center. They drew a few vials of blood and did an ultrasound on my glands and abdomen. Diana said my condition was good. The blood test showed trace amounts of pheromones. I'd be able to consistently sense pheromones soon. She asked if I had noticed anything recently. I nodded. She smiled as she looked at the ultrasound, pointing to a clearly defined sac in the center. This has developed quite a bit. In less than a year, you'll get your wish and can start trying to conceive. I looked at it quietly for a moment. I couldn't remember any of the anticipation or excitement I'd felt just days ago. I smiled. No, I've already thrown out the conversion medication. Diana looked confused, but not angry. She calmly placed the test results on the table and asked hesitantly, "Why did you suddenly stop taking it?" I told you the differentiation process is irreversible. Even if you stop the medication now, the traits that have already appeared won't disappear. You won't continue to differentiate, but you can't go back to how you were. Of course, I knew that. At the very beginning of the trial, Diana had warned me repeatedly. Back then, all I could think about was having a baby and being with Sean forever. I never considered anything else. But things change. Even the person you trust most in the world can suddenly rot from the inside out. I opened my mouth and said flatly, "My partner met his fated omega." Diana was stunned for a moment, then let out a long sigh. While I could say that the attraction between an alpha and an omega is natural, and a fated pairing is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, that doesn't make what your husband did right. She picked up a pen and scribbled in the trial logbook. Next to my name, she noted in red ink, "Trial discontinued. Good thing you can still cut your losses. Lucas, go be yourself." Believe it or not, betas are freer than alphas and omegas. I stood up and sincerely apologized and thanked her. The trial was free. I provided her with data, and she provided me with all the help I needed. It was on me to apologize for stopping the trial abruptly. I don't have many friends. Diana is one of them. She was a high school classmate. We ran into each other at a ceramics exhibition. She was the only friend I invited to my wedding reception. After I married Sean, the omegas in his high society circle looked down on me. The alphas were all busy sucking up to Sean and didn't dare get close to me. The betas were all very respectful and looked at me with envy. Sean said that was for the best. That way, I would only have to focus on him. My world, it seemed, had shrunk to just Sean. Now that he was gone, all I had left was myself. Without realizing it, I had wandered to the entrance of the alley where I first met Sean. I walked inside. The alley had changed completely. The pottery shop was gone, replaced by a quiet, elegant bar. The sun was setting, but the bar was already noisy. I wasn't looking to drown my sorrows. I ignored the pang of melancholy and turned to leave. Suddenly, a young man in a waiter's uniform burst out of the bar. His face was flushed, his breathing hot and heavy. The moment he bumped into me, the overpowering scent of peaches flooded my senses. He stumbled away, quickly turning right at the corner. A few drunk alphas with bleached hair chased after him. They were cursing loudly. "Damn, that little O is fast. We almost had him. Don't worry, he drank an inducer. His legs are jelly, he can't have gotten far." One of them jerked his chin at me. "Hey, you see an omega? Which way did he go?" Another one got close, his nostrils flaring. "Are you a beta or an omega? You smell kinda sweet." My heart seized. I pointed to the left. "That way." After confirming I didn't have a scent, they took off down the left fork. I was a little shaken, patted my chest. I finally understood what Diana meant by freedom. I was still worried, so I followed the direction the peach-scented omega had gone. I was almost at the end of the alley. That's when I realized the cloyingly sweet scent was somehow familiar. I had only smelled it once, but it had left a deep impression. I stopped in my tracks, standing at the corner. I heard urgent footsteps approaching the omega. The omega threw himself into someone's arms, sobbing. "Sean, they drugged me into a heat. Can you help me? Please?" Sean's voice was laced with anger. "Didn't I tell you to quit that damn job? Is being a bar host that great? The Omega's crying was pitiful, his words broken. I don't want to take your money. I have my pride. I can earn my own money, and I wasn't hosting. Sean gritted his teeth. His footsteps grew heavier. Then what are you doing with me? I looked down, thinking. I opened my phone's camera and secretly started recording. I still couldn't help myself. I peeked around the corner at their backs. Sean was carrying the kid, walking with heavy, urgent strides. At his question, the Omega lifted his head from Sean's chest. His eyes were hazy as he clumsily kissed Sean all over. I like you, big brother. I like you so much, he said, sounding utterly pathetic. Sean stopped walking. At the corner, he shifted his arms. He repositioned the boy so his legs were wrapped around his waist. He pressed him against the wall. He grabbed his chin and kissed him fiercely. You stupid, pitiful little thing. Their lips and tongues tangled, the sound wet and loud. I hid in the darkness, staring blankly at the video on my phone. Plink. It started raining on my phone screen. One drop, then two, blurring the image. I looked up. Not a cloud in the sky. It was my eyes that were raining. I could smell Sean's pheromones. It was a scent I knew well. The garden was full of that floral fragrance. No wonder when I said I liked forget-me-nots, Sean had grinned like the cat that got the canary. I asked him what was so funny, but he wouldn't say. He just kissed me hard and told me I had great taste. No wonder when he proposed, he gave me a bouquet of forget-me-nots and said he was giving himself to me. I had made tea with forget-me-nots before. It was a little bitter, but if you savored it, there was a sweet aftertaste. Not like its scent, which was so bitter it made my tongue feel numb and thick. On the way home, Sean called. His voice was a little heavy, full of apology. Baby, I'm buried in work. I have to pull an all-nighter. I'm gonna crash in the break room at the office. Make sure you eat well, don't wait up for me. I'll make it up to you as soon as I'm done. I pulled my lips into a smile and whispered, okay. It was better if he didn't come back. Pretending to be normal was exhausting. I know I should have just been cool about it. Packed a bag and left without a second thought. But I'm just an ordinary person. I could only pull away little by little. I sold all the luxury goods and antique porcelain Sean had given me. It was a lot of money. I had never seen so much money in my life. Sean had given me a credit card and told me to spend whatever I wanted. But I was frugal by nature. I didn't know how to spend large sums of money. Only now did I feel like I'd lost out. I wasn't so noble that I could walk away from a 7-year relationship with nothing. My youth might not be worth much, but it wasn't worthless. I transferred the millions of dollars to Diana. Diana called me. I explained half of it is for the past trial expenses. You can give me the other half later. Diana knew I was preparing for the future. She didn't say much else. An Omega's heat lasts about as long as an Alpha's rut. Sean came back 3 days later. He was wearing a suit I'd never seen before, his tie a little crooked. He was carrying a gift box. It was a Vacheron Constantine watch. He shoved the box into my hands and pulled me into an intimate hug. I missed you so much, he said, his voice weary. I've been working overtime for 3 days straight. I'm so tired. I need you to recharge me. I closed my eyes, my heart prickling with a dense, sharp pain. How could he be so composed, coming straight from an Omega's bed and hugging me without a shred of guilt? Was this kind of shameless confidence something Alphas were just born with? I would never know. All I could do was pretend I knew nothing and squirm out of that embrace that looked warm but felt like needles. If you're tired, you should get some rest. Sean loosened his tie, looking a little annoyed. It's been so long since we've been intimate. Don't you miss me? I was silent for a moment, then curved my lips into a smile and started taking off his jacket. Should I run a bath for you? Sean's lips curved up too, but then he seemed to remember something. He stopped abruptly. He intimately tapped my nose and teased, better not. Your husband is too tired, he needs a good rest. Wait a few days, and I promise I'll satisfy my little kitten. I stared at his fingertips, my smile dropping. What did he mean, too tired? It was obvious his body was covered in scratches from some wildcat. Sean saw I was unhappy and tried to placate me. There's a porcelain art exhibition in a couple of days. I got us 2 invitations. I'll go with you. I managed a weak smile, my interest feigned. Will you have time? I can go by myself. Sean linked his fingers with mine and pulled me onto the sofa. Of course I have time. Why else do you think I work so hard? It's all so I can clear my schedule and spend more time with my baby. I looked at him wordlessly, wanting to ask if he actually believed his own bullshit. But there was no point. It would only lead to another argument. I said suddenly, Sean, do you know what I hate most in the world? Sean laughed and lifted my hand. He kissed my palm. Can't possibly be me. I laughed too and said, word by word, the one thing I hate is a liar. He thought I was pressuring him to go with me. I'm not lying, he said gently. I'll really go with you. He raised his hand as if to swear an oath. Cross my heart. Heaven probably hears that flimsy oath 1,000,000 times a day. It doesn't have time to punish every liar. I pulled my hand away and gave him a little push. Go get some rest. I hadn't smelled Sean's pheromones for several days. I didn't know if it was because the scent of the forget-me-nots was too strong, or if my sense of smell was just off. The day of the exhibition, I found out why. There were many alphas and omegas at the event. I could smell the subtle, chaotic mix of pheromones. It lingered in the air, refusing to dissipate. But among them, there was no sweet scent of peaches or the light fragrance of forget-me-nots. Sean had actually cleared his schedule to come with me, and we ran into that omega here. He had a work badge hanging around his neck. The name Ethan was printed in large letters. His hair was stylishly messy, his eyes round and innocent. When he bowed his head, the back of his neck revealed a clear mark, a perfect circle of teeth marks. I might not be an omega, but I knew the basics. He had been permanently marked. That's why he had no scent and wasn't afraid to be in a place crowded with alphas. And he didn't have to worry about a sudden heat disrupting the exhibition. When Sean saw him, he faltered for a second. But he quickly recovered and continued looking at the exhibits with me. Partway through, he said he needed to use the restroom. I followed him instinctively, keeping my distance. I watched him pull Ethan into a corner. Cut the crap, he chided. Don't think you can do whatever you want just because I marked you. If Lucas finds out, I don't care if you're my fated omega. I can have that mark removed. Ethan looked hurt and innocent. Our school organized this volunteer event. We get credits for it. I didn't know you guys would be here. As he spoke, he started to choke up, wiping away tears. You never tell me anything. Why do you always think the worst of me? He pushed Sean away and ran off. He brushed past me as he fled. Sean stood there for a moment, took a deep breath, and turned to leave. We came face to face. He froze, a flicker of panic in his eyes. Baby, when did you get here? I shrugged, tired of pretending. I gestured in the direction Ethan had run. Aren't you going to go after him? Let me explain, Sean said urgently. There's nothing between us. I held up a hand, cutting him off. It's okay. I understand. He stared at me, confused. You understand? I thought for a moment, then put on my best I love you so much it hurts act. I gave a bitter, self-deprecating laugh. You need a child. I can't give you one, so I have to accept you having one with an omega. Sean studied me for a long time, a strange smile on his face. Is that what you think? What does that make me? Do you think my love for you is something I can just casually share with someone else? There's nothing between him and me. He was angry. I had no idea what right he had to be angry. Ignoring his tantrum, I patted his shoulder. There's still half the exhibition to see. I'm gonna go on ahead. He just stood there, not moving for a long time. On the evening of the 6th day after I discovered Sean's cheating, he was giving me the silent treatment. He had said only one thing to me all day. When you're ready to admit you were wrong, I'll come back to our room. I was happy for the space. I saw him off at the door. That night, I drafted the divorce papers. On the 7th day, I got a text from an unknown number. When I arrived at the coffee shop, Ethan was already there. He was calm, almost mature. So, I hear you can accept my existence? He took a sip of his coffee, lifted his chin, and smiled at me. You don't have to play the victim. You're just an ordinary beta, and I'm his fated omega. The only advantage you have is being born 10 years earlier than me, which allowed you to occupy my alpha for a decade. Even if you fight it, he'll come back to me sooner or later. I didn't say a word. I had actually thought he was a victim, a poor kid trapped by his own biology. At least, he had never tried to flaunt his position in front of me. Now I saw that it wasn't because he didn't want to, but because he didn't think I was worth the effort. Because I wasn't worthy. I picked up my coffee. It was hot. I hesitated for a few seconds, debating whether to throw it on him or drink it. In the end, I put the coffee back on the table. I stood up and slapped him twice across the face. It's one thing to be a homewrecker. That's just pathetic. It's another to flaunt your disgusting behavior in my face. That's just plain trashy. Ethan's calm demeanor finally cracked, his eyes red with rage. I turned and walked away. I wish you two scumbags a long and happy life together. I didn't know if Ethan would go crying to Sean. I didn't care. When I got home, I packed a small bag. I only took my ID, leaving everything else behind. I went out to the garden and dug up all the forget-me-nots, burying them back in the earth. On the coffee table in the living room, I left a flash drive and a set of divorce papers. I took a night flight which turned into a bus ride, which turned into a motorcycle ride. Back to Blue Cloud Mountain where I was born and raised. There were few alphas and omegas here. No family either. But the old house they left me was still standing. It was just covered in moss and mold. Took me 3 days of cleaning before the house started to feel like a home again. When Ethan showed up with a swollen, red face, Sean was secretly pleased. He thought Lucas is just acting tough. He actually cares about me so much. This is how it should be. He, Sean, had fought so hard against his own instincts to love Lucas. For 10 whole years. For Lucas, he had rejected the advances of countless omegas. So how dare Lucas accept him being with Ethan? Doesn't that mean Lucas doesn't care about him? He couldn't accept that. So he threw a tantrum. See? It only took a day for Lucas to break. He ignored Ethan's face, humming a tune as he carried a bouquet of forget-me-nots home. The house was empty. That morning, even though they were fighting, Lucas had still tied his tie. He had even told him to have a safe trip. He placed the forget-me-nots in the antique vase he had given Lucas. He tried calling Lucas. He has no friends, nowhere to go. He must have gone to the mall to look at porcelain again. But the call wouldn't go through. After the third try, he finally noticed the items on the coffee table. When Sean saw the divorce papers, he panicked. He didn't look at the flash drive. He ran upstairs and saw that all of Lucas's clothes and personal items were still there. Nothing was missing. He let out a sigh of relief. He figured Lucas was just throwing a fit. He could coax him back. It would be fine. He was easy to please. And besides, he had nowhere else to go. It wasn't until he plugged the flash drive into his computer. He heard an audio recording. It was the conversation he'd had with his friends on the rooftop of the club. Then he saw a video. It was him picking up a drugged Ethan, getting seduced by the pheromones, and kissing him uncontrollably. Finally, there was a text file. Sean, I can accept you being with someone else because I plan on leaving. I told you the one thing I hate is a liar. You always said you were fighting your instincts to love me. Thinking about it now, that could also mean your instincts are not to love me. Sign the divorce papers. Let's give all of us some dignity. Lastly, I hate forget-me-nots. Sean's eyes turned red. No, he loved Lucas. He loved his gentle eyes. He loved his pure smile. He loved his quiet focus when he made pottery. He loved his courage when he took a bullet for him. But he was an alpha. During his rut, he met his fated omega. In that instant, his mind exploded with fireworks. He was dazed. His head filled with nothing but the urge to mate with his omega. It was an instinct no alpha could resist. He couldn't help it. He didn't want to make a mistake. Otherwise, he would have made one long ago. Wouldn't he? Sean called everyone who might possibly know Lucas. But he discovered that, apart from Diana, Lucas had no connection to anyone. He went to the differentiation center to find Diana. Diana was an alpha too. She would definitely understand him. But Diana just glanced at him and handed him a trial log and a medical report. She said, while he was trying so hard to have a baby for you, you chose to have an omega carry your child. He was able to sense your pheromones at one point, but it seems it only happened once or twice. I don't know where he went. He never contacted me for anything other than changing his body. Sean stared at the increasingly clear image of the gestational sac on the ultrasound, a lump forming in his throat. If he had known, he would have held out a little longer. Then he and Lucas could have had a child. When he returned home, Sean realized with a start that the flowers in the garden were gone. The gold-dusted pot that had sat empty for so long was somehow shattered again. The scentless flower he had hidden in the mansion was completely gone. A week later, I left the mountains. The mountains were peaceful and the air was clean. I could make pottery in the mountains, but it wasn't a good place to fire it. Firing porcelain requires a high-temperature kiln. I was worried I'd accidentally set the mountain on fire. I also needed to buy a new potter's wheel. The one my family left me was ancient. I tried it out, but my hands were too clumsy. That, combined with my uncooperative hand, meant I couldn't throw a decent pot. An old man from the village said he was going into town to pick up supplies and offered me a free ride. I rode into town in the back of his rattling pickup truck. After buying my things, I had them delivered to the mountain. Then I visited every single pottery shop. I asked if there were any local kilns. It was getting dark by the time I finally found one. It was a pottery shop run by a young man, tucked deep in an old alley. His kiln was in the suburbs. He enthusiastically took me to see it, his cute canine teeth always on display. He said I could use it whenever I wanted.
No charge.
Not many young people are interested in this kind of thing anymore. I'm just happy to have someone to share the experience of waiting for the pottery to come out of the kiln. He talked as if he were middle-aged. I laughed. You're pretty young yourself. A few weeks passed. I fired 3 kilns full of ugly pieces. Alex and I, our hands covered in clay, just laughed. Sorry, it's been a while. Don't worry about it. Good things take time. I rotated my wrist, planning to take these imperfect pieces back and give them to the villagers. They weren't picky. They would praise my skill and call me capable. My phone rang. It was Sean. He called often. The signal in the mountains wasn't great, so I usually missed them. When I did answer, he would just ask when I was coming home, or say he wanted to come find me. I told him I was already home, and not to contact me about anything other than the divorce. Today his voice was tight. Fine, I'll sign. Just come back. When Alex heard I was going to the city to finalize my divorce, he kindly offered to drive me. I tried to refuse. He said, don't feel bad about it. I need to be in that area to prep for my solo exhibition anyway. It's on the way. He dropped me off at the marriage registration office. He waited outside, smiling. Since you're here, why not check out my show? Couldn't say no. Sean was waiting for me at the entrance. He had lost a lot of weight. His eye sockets were sunken, his expression heavy. He asked, is that an alpha? I didn't know. I'd never smelled any pheromones from him, and I had no obligation to answer his question. It's none of your business. Let's go. Let's end this relationship and go our separate ways. Sean grabbed my wrist. He painfully kissed the scar there. Can we not? Please? Ethan and I both had our marks removed. You can smell my pheromones again. Just for you. His scent suddenly flooded the air, wrapping around me. I shook his hand off and slapped him across the face. I stumbled back a few steps. I covered my nose and said coldly, sorry. I'm not used to pheromones. They're pungent. I told you I hate liars. If you're lying to me again, then I'll have to take this to court. Sean turned his face away and didn't look back for a long time, as if he couldn't believe I would hit him. Finally, his lips trembled. He tried to bargain. Can we still be friends, then? We can start over. You can use me. You love porcelain, I'll fund a lifetime of solo exhibitions for you. I suddenly remembered the first pot I ever made. It wasn't particularly beautiful, but it was my favorite. Even after it shattered, I picked up the pieces and did my best to repair them. I glued it back together. At the time, Sean, despite his disdain, had begrudgingly helped me fill the cracks with gold dust. The ugly pot's surface was traced with several shimmering gold lines. Anyone could see it had been broken. It wasn't good to look at, and it wasn't good for much else. Sean, do you remember when we first met? You shattered my pot? Later, I used it to hold the flowers you gave me. The flowers always withered so quickly. It wasn't until much later that I realized. When neither of us was paying attention, all the water had leaked out of the pot. A flower with no roots, deprived of water, can only wither. A pot that's been broken can never be truly fixed. It can't hold water. A person who isn't sincere can never wash away their filth, no matter how much they regret it. The pot, the flowers, and you, I don't want any of it anymore. The color drained from Sean's face. Even if I've repaired the pot again. He excitedly pulled out his phone to show me a video of him gluing the pot back together. I glanced at it, then looked away. Can it really be fixed? I asked flatly. Sean was speechless. He numbly went with me to complete the paperwork. The clerk had seen it all before. Another alpha-beta couple. You people who refuse to believe the odds make up most of our divorce cases. Why even get together in the first place? Sean roared at him to shut up. The terrified clerk worked twice as fast. He handed us our divorce certificates. Sean stood there like a statue, watching me leave. I didn't hesitate. I slammed the car door and we drove away. Since I was in the city, I took the opportunity to meet up with Diana for tea. I also invited her to the exhibition. Diana declined, saying with a smile that she didn't have an artistic bone in her body and was busy with her experiments. She returned my money and wished me freedom. 3 days later, a huge sum of money appeared in my bank account. A transfer from Sean. I wasn't proud enough to refuse it. I turned around and donated it to our village chief, telling him to fix the roads. A week later, I went with Alex to his solo exhibition. That's when I learned he was the famous master ceramicist, Issa. One color in the kiln, 10,000 colors out, all beautiful. Those were the exact words my old master used to say to me. Back then, Issa was still a college student, always coming and going in a rush. I think I saw him a few times, but we never interacted, and he didn't leave much of an impression. Then Sean showed up and completely occupied my mind. I never got to know the talented young man. Alex, you're so modest. Alex chuckled. There's nothing to show off. He said suddenly, I recognized you the moment I saw you. You're my senior apprentice. Master told me your hand was injured. I thought you'd never make pottery again. I smiled and shook my head, my eyes fixed on the varied shapes and colors of the pieces in the exhibit. Life doesn't have to be perfect, and neither does pottery. Art isn't that demanding. Suddenly, a commotion started in another part of the exhibition. As the person in charge, Alex naturally had to go check it out. I followed him. At the entrance, Ethan, wearing a staff uniform, was being dragged out by Sean. Who said you could be here? Get the hell out. Ethan was furious and hurt, his face stained with tears. My professor recommended me for this. What does it have to do with you? This isn't your exhibition. What right do you have to kick me out? Alex glanced at me, then walked forward. Excuse me, this is my exhibition. I'm gonna have to ask you to keep your voices down. Sean saw me standing behind him and let go of Ethan. He stared at me, stunned. I knew you'd be here, he murmured. Then he pointed accusingly at Alex. You came with him? His voice was full of indignation and disdain. He's just a beta. No matter how promising he is, he'll never compare to me. A smile spread across my face. So that's what you think. But I'm just a beta too. That's not what I meant, Sean said, flustered. You're different, Lucas. You're different. How am I different? Because I saved him? We're the same, Sean. I would have saved anyone in that situation. It was the same in the alley. I was trying to save Ethan, not catch you cheating. It just so happened that I discovered he didn't need my help. Both Ethan and Sean were frozen. I looked up at Alex. You handle this. I'm gonna keep looking around. Alex nodded. I turned away. That was the last time I ever saw Sean. From then on, we went our separate ways, each to find our own happiness.
Epilogue. Sean.
I couldn't get Lucas back. After the divorce, I drank myself into a stupor. My friends all told me to just get together with Ethan. We were fated mates, after all. I cut them all off. Not long after, Ethan found me. He said he was pregnant. I thought he was trying to use the baby to trap me. Have it, I said coldly. I'll give you money. As for him, he could go back to wherever he came from. Ethan laughed. A trembling sound. You wish. I already got rid of it. Person like you doesn't deserve to have children. I looked at his smiling face and hated him. If he hadn't shown up when I was in my rut, I never would have lost Lucas. It was all his fault. I wanted to strangle him, but as soon as his pheromones filled the air, my head grew fuzzy. Ethan smirked and patted my cheek. You alphas are all pathetic creatures, and you call yourselves romantics? He left too. I was completely alone. Epilogue. Alex. My master always told me he had another apprentice who was my complete opposite. He pursued pure, single colors. He was never satisfied with the ceramics he made. But in reality, his pieces were the ones that sold the best. I always wanted to talk to him, but there was always a tall man by his side, clinging to him, never leaving him for a second. I knew how to read a room, so I gave up on the idea of striking up a conversation. I never expected that, nearly 10 years later, he would show up at my shop alone. He asked me, "Excuse me, do you know where I can find a kiln?" I smiled and said, "I have one. You can use it for free." He was never afraid of hard work. He'd hide away on Blue Cloud Mountain, all alone, making pot after pot. He'd paint them with imperfect designs and bring a whole truckload to me. He'd stare at the kiln, counting the seconds until he could open it. My master was right. He was truly pure. When he was in love and when he was doing what he loved. I started to hope that one day, he would look at me with that same intensity. It didn't have to be often, just once in a while. Took me 3 years. 3 years before he was brave enough again to take my hand, to work the clay with me. Together, we created a set of our own ruby red glazed porcelain. Plates and bowls and a tea set. This time, when I opened the kiln, there were no other colors. 2 years into our relationship, a tiny bean, just a few millimeters long, appeared in Lucas's belly. We were both stunned. But the doctor said his body hadn't fully converted. It wasn't safe for him to carry a pregnancy, the risks were too high. Lucas wanted to try. I refused. To me, nothing was more important than him. I made him terminate it. He cried and threw a fit. It was our first fight. I cried too, but quietly, just watching him. He stopped fussing then, and obediently drank the medicine I handed him. After that, I made sure to use protection every time I held him. My Lucas should only ever be smiling. He should only cry at very specific times. Any other time, I never want to see him cry.